Oliver had.
But you didn't see that earlier today?
No. What's happening?
Well,
It's your true form.
this is my ultimate form right here.
Oh, hey there, baby. What's your side? All right, I'm going to say this, and it's probably not appropriate, but I'm going for it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm more concerned not by the fact that you're dressed a little awkwardly, but all year long we've had young ladies who come in the room, some of them dressed in different attire, some of them maybe even looking cute. And today, my boys seem enthralled by our attractively dressed young man, which either is a really bad indication about the females of Elkhorn School.
Oh, so hurt, so hurt.
Yeah, Dan. All righty.
You were doing an oar?
I'm trying to figure out why the Little Mermaid's in my class. So you're supposed to be like, well, you could be her after she talked to Ursula. Yeah. Oh, she could be Ursula. So this is, I would be far more shocked if you completely went with the whole coconut thing, but you figure you were getting in trouble then, huh? And
You just call up us off today.
No.
You can't do this.
so how's the Shire?
It's terrible. We have wars everywhere. Gotta kill a few people, you know, battle axe.
And how's the street?
It's pretty active.
Is that why
A lot of visitors coming through.
Is that why you were late?
Yes. That is extremely hard to walk in these. Yes.
Well, I'm pretty sure Dan's gonna be hunting you down the hallway. So, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Let's see if we can get something done. I don't know. Okay.
I don't know, can you?
No, I can go just fine. I'm just trying to figure out exactly what American literature is up to. And if it's not American literature, we have a lot more problems. You know what? I really think some random person who's not in American literature should come dressed up really nuts and just see if they can pass by. All right, here we go. I'm sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday we were dealing with Oliver Perry, and he had built up his navy. And ladies and gentlemen, look at the name of the battle, Put in Bay. Oliver Perry goes and he gathers up supplies, he steals ships. Literally what they do is they take the boats on the shore of Lake Erie, they push them into the water, and then they sail off to fight. Please understand, these are not great ocean ships. It's not like the USS Constitution. This is going to be much more like Saturday at a sandbar. Yes, sir?
So like how did he end up getting...
Soldiers?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, the soldiers that's kind of where the bell was ringing, is he discovers that in Ohio there is a fugitive slave town. What you want to understand is, even though we have not even begun the abolition movement, surprise, surprise, most slaves didn't like being slaves, and some slaves were actually running away. In Ohio, there was a large community. Folks, most likely, Oliver Perry tried to convince them that, maybe he could pardon them or help them. Let's be honest. Slaves, whether they're fugitive or not, are what? The property. Folks, the only way for a slave to be free up until 1865 is to go to Canada, because Canada is a separate country where slavery is illegal. By Oliver Hazard Perry showing up in the town, each and every one of those slaves is now in trouble because word is going to get out. Oliver Perry goes to them He basically explains the situation. He asks men that by the letter of the law are pieces of property and they are hiding from the authorities if they would fight for the United States of America. And ladies and gentlemen, the crazy, weird thing is they agree. About a quarter of Oliver Perry's Navy will be made up of African men. And folks, what is so amazing about this, and why does this deserve some notice, is in the War of 1812, in the year 1813, African American men and white men will fight together in the Battle of Put-in Bay. There was no, bless you, segregation. There was not a black ship and a white ship. They were not divided by race. The men went off to fight the British. Ladies and gentlemen, the United States will not fight in a truly integrated fashion again until World War II. Yes, we will have African men who fight in other conflicts, but it would always be in segregated black units. Of course, what happens is Oliver Perry goes out. According to the story, Oliver Hazard Perry somehow or another convinces his men. I mean, think about the Africans, they're protecting their home. But Oliver Perry convinces the men that they are fighting for their families and their homes and, you know, their land. And Oliver Perry is able to defeat the British. I mean, Oliver Perry fights a remarkable battle. The American army was outnumbered. They were outgunned. I mean, just to give you an idea, and I do think that this is one of those things that it just sort of shows that whole, when you look at history, there's things that sort of bring up relevance. On Oliver Perry's ship, and again, I don't know if you need the numbers, I think it's more what happened. On Oliver Perry's ship, which would be the largest of the American ships, it started with 103 men. During the battle, 85 died. Ladies and gentlemen, this was one of those battles where however Oliver Perry did it, he convinced his men to fight to the death. And literally, Perry's men simply kept fighting and fighting and fighting, and finally the British decided this is simply too barbaric, it is too bloody, and the British turned and left.
Oh wait, 105?
103 started and 85 died. Folks, I'm going to tell you something real simple. You do not see 80% casualty rates very often. I mean, think about it. In most wars, if you have a 10, 15% casualty rate, that is considered horrific. 80%.
Perry survived?
Yes, he does. Ladies and gentlemen, what goes with it, and again, I know we're not giving a lot of fanfare to it, as Oliver Perry drives the British off Lake Erie, William Henry Harrison attacks Fort Detroit by land. Without the help of the British, William Henry Harrison fairly easily recaptures Fort Detroit, and he drives Isaac Brock and the Canadians away. So ladies and gentlemen, when you look at the Battle of Put-in Bay, yes, we have the slaves, yes, drive off the British. The real item is we recapture Fort Detroit, and the United States has protected Michigan. That is what the battle is about. That is really why we talk about it. Yes, sir?
At this point in time, do our generals and stuff, do they actually fight? Like, does Oliver...
Completely. Now, Oliver Perry is not really a general.
Like
Harrison was a general. It really is going to depend on the battle, what is going on, and the person. What you will begin to see very soon is there are going to be what are called field generals and commanding generals. A commanding general is going to have like a camp a few miles back. He is going to devise the overall field. That would be like a Robert E. Lee. A field general is the man who takes the plan and implements it to the front. That would be more like Andrew Jackson. People who are on the front, yes, they will fight, they will have a gun in their hand, they're going to ride the battle.
What about Napoleon? Is he more of a...
Napoleon is also the president. So, I mean, yes, Napoleon had fought in his life, but he is more of a commander. He is going to be, especially because of the fact that he was also the president, the dictator, whatever you want to call him. So, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. What is the single most important thing to understand about the battle? Is the big item. That is the main thing. The other thing you might want to indicate, when Fort Detroit falls, the United States then begins to send negotiators. There's nothing we would like better than to end this war. The United States basically is acknowledging that the war was a mistake. We are not going to get Canada. We are also going to find out that the search, seizure, and impressment, there are some issues with that. So please understand, the United States now having reclaimed, would love to find a way to end the conflict. Before we do that, we have one more small item. After we recapture Fort Detroit, the United States decides to drive the Canadians and the Indians out of Michigan, and we are going to fight Tecumseh. The battle is called the Battle of the Thames. So basically, after we recapture Fort Detroit, the United States is going to the Battle of the Thames, and it's the river. It's actually named after the river in Europe.
How do you
Thames. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be very honest. The battle itself has very small significance. In fact, the battle is a draw. Neither side, the Army or the Indians, were really able to win the battle. Ladies and gentlemen, there is one reason and one reason only that the Battle of the Thames is in your notes. In the battle, which was a very kind of wildernessy, hard guerrilla battle, Tecumseh is shot and killed. For a while, there was rumor, there was speculation, and what do we know? Tecumseh will never be seen. Folks, what is so amazing about this? And I think this really helps you to try to understand the time period. In the Battle of the Thames, today, it's a small little footnote in history. During the battle, a young man, and he was literally kind of really more of the opposite of what Griffin was asking. The young man's name is Richard Mentor Johnson. Richard Mentor Johnson was your average soldier. He was like a private. He was simply a guy who joined to fight the enemy. In the Battle of the Thames, Richard Mentor Johnson claims he shot and killed Tecumseh. One of his friends, his buddies, supports the story. You know, he signs his name. I saw it. You know, I saw Richard Newton. I saw the great war chief fall. Big deal. Richard Mentor Johnson becomes a hero. People want to interview him. People want him to hear the story. They make little, you know, like dime store novels about it. You know, his name becomes kind of a household name. Oh, he gets better than that. In 1836, Richard Mentor Johnson, largely on the great claim to fame, I shot Tecumseh, will be elected Vice President of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, this man became a heartbeat away from the presidency, and really, what was the reason? They wanted a man, because fighting Indians, protecting us from Indians was a way to get favor of the people. It was kind of like a popularity vote. I have told students for years, and I think for a long time, people thought Mr. Cleveland was kidding. In your lifetime, you are going to start seeing something, and it is beginning to happen. For years and years and years, our country's heroes were warriors. They were soldiers. It was very common that soldiers then went on to become politicians. Anyone want to guess what my prediction is? What would be the common pattern for today? We need heroes. Heroes, therefore, get respect of the people. What would be the modern day heroes for you people? Ladies and gentlemen, who do we look up to? Athletes and actors and actresses. What are we beginning to see more and more common? Actors, actresses in Congress. We've had members on the Supreme Court. We've had presidents. Folks, am I saying it's bad? Heck, some of them are very intelligent people. What I'm saying is there used to be a time that we looked up to war heroes as protecting us, saving us. Today, we have a habit of looking up to a guy who can dribble a ball, or a guy who pretended to kill aliens. Right? You watch. The only way that would change is if we get into a war where it becomes more of the very popular mainstream. But ever since Vietnam, wars have not been done. What was that? He's an actor.
Didn't he want to run for president?
There was a period of time before he, of course, got into his recent scandals where there was serious talk. I mean, there was talk of states proposing amendments, and it was flat out or Arnold Schwarzenegger. But you had a two-pronged thing. First of all, the Democrats aren't stupid. I mean, if the Republicans are proposing an amendment, they knew who it was for.
Watch, is he that smart of a man? Like,
The presidentator.
But what you have to look at, folks, is becoming president isn't always about being the smart. If that was the case, wouldn't all of our presidents be from Harvard and MIT?
well, I'm saying he doesn't.
No, wait. The point is, presidents need popularity, and as you know, he was governor and stuff, you need to find a way to make people believe that what you're doing is legitimate. Heck, in Minnesota, they had Jesse Ventura, the pro wrestler, as their governor. Alan Page was a justice on the Supreme Court. Actually, that was state Supreme Court, though. Okay? Steve Largent was in the Senate. And we had a lot. So, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. So where we are at is it's 1813, and really the United States desperately is trying to get out of this mess. We send negotiators. We are trying to convince the English, hey, why don't we just sort of kiss and make up? And ladies and gentlemen, what you need to find a way to sort of say, highlight, put in your notes, and stupid Napoleon begins losing. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1813, Napoleon's empire, after 12 years of dominance and invincibility, Napoleon's empire begins to fall. Basically, kind of on the verge of Russia, all of Europe join up. I mean, people were sick and tired of Napoleon, and very similar to what happens to Hitler, all of the Europeans that Napoleon had conquered, they kind of joined together. Napoleon is beaten in a battle, but what happens is it took 12 years for Napoleon's empire to grow. After he loses one battle, what happens is all the country that he conquers rises up. Napoleon had outstretched his resources, so after he loses, as he begins to fall, his enemies begin to attack him. Bless you. And in 1 year, Napoleon literally has retreated all the way back to France. Ladies and gentlemen, by the end of 1813, Napoleon Bonaparte and the great empire of France is on the verge of falling. And for those of you who are trying to figure out why are you throwing this in here, who can tell me?
If Napoleon falls, then all the British men force on.
Ladies and gentlemen, remember when we started this, I said one of the real motivations for the war is England was occupied, England was fighting the bear. Ladies and gentlemen, the importance of Napoleon's fall is England, who looks at America as kind of an annoyance, who looks at America as one of their greatest embarrassments, the American Revolution. England believes that this is now their shot to erase the American Revolution. And let's be honest, France will not be coming to the rescue this time. So ladies and gentlemen, in the year 1814, what is the number one thing you need to identify? England is coming. And England basically is going to take their shot at knocking the colonies down. And ladies and gentlemen, England is going to identify 3 targets. England believes if they could capture these 3 targets, they could force the United States into some sort of an agreement. The 3 targets were Washington, D.C., New York City, and New Orleans. So as we move forward in the notes, what you are going to notice is we are going to see the British attempting attacks on those 3 locations. Washington, D.C., of course, the capital. New York City, America's largest trade center. And New Orleans, which is kind of the center of the new westward expansion. Questions on that?
Did Napoleon get shipped off to an island?
Yeah, for those who don't know, after the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon will be shipped to an island. The idea was people were kind of against the death penalty. And for those who don't know, Napoleon actually escapes. He comes back. He actually tries to rebuild his army, and they end up fighting another battle. Once again, they put him back on the island, except this time they believe he was poisoned first, because he'll never be seen or heard from. In any case, ladies and gentlemen, what we'd like to deal with first is the attack on Washington, which is most properly known as the Battle of Bladensburg. Ladies and gentlemen, what we would like to deal with is the Battle of Bladensburg. If you want to give yourself a hint, and folks, a hint should be something you should know. It should be something that pops in your brain. The Battle of Bladensburg, which is also known as the Battle of Washington, D.C., is the most embarrassing, the most humiliating event of the war. The Battle of Bladensburg is one of the low points of American military history. This is a horrible battle.
Is George Washington still alive?
I believe he technically died because he was alive like to 1812. When the war started, they were. Does anybody know how he dies? What actually kills George? Ladies and gentlemen, he got the flu, he got sick, and at this time in history, there was a belief that medicine was, if you were sick, you have bad blood, and basically your blood is contaminated. So the belief was, if a person was sick, they would literally cut you, and they would drain blood out, with the idea that if they drained out enough bad blood, your heart would then basically create new blood, which would basically be able to kind of recover. So in reality, what happened, in fact, this is the same thing, have you ever heard it called leeching? They would often take leeches and put it on a person. It's the same concept because the leeches suck out blood. The problem is it was more common, this type of medicine, the cutting actually killed you faster because people simply, become anemic. So folks, here's what happens. Basically the British Navy comes in. The British Navy enters the Chesapeake Bay. The United States actually had 26 gunboats that were built to protect the capital. For the life of me, I can't exactly explain to you why they did this. As the British Navy enters the Chesapeake, which is a fairly big river, the gunboats are like pontoon boats. They're kind of, they are meant for very shallow water. Somehow or another, when the British Navy enters the Chesapeake, the Americans somehow or another either got tricked or confused, and they basically go up they retreat down the James River. If you're retreating down the James River, that would seem to indicate that they were protecting Richmond versus Washington. Well, eventually it was discovered that the British kept going north. The gunboats will never fire a shot. In fact, eventually we literally take the cannons off the gunboats, we burn the ships so that the British could not use them against us, and then we use the cannons and we move them elsewhere. But the boats that we had built, because really the gunboats would not be meant to, you can't fight warships with the gunboats. They were meant to basically park like on the river and provide naval support or artillery support. So the British basically head up to Washington, D.C. relatively unmolested, and they will drop off, and here's the beginning. Remember I keep using the word embarrassing, humiliating. The British attack force, because if you look at Washington, D.C., it is on the Potomac River, but it is very narrow. It is not a place the British want to get their warships trapped. So what the British do is they're out here in the Chesapeake. They drop off an army led by a man named Robert Ross, and Robert Ross is going to lead a land invasion. What is the embarrassing part? He has 4,000 men. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1814, Robert Ross and 4,000 British soldiers will lead an attack on our capital. 4,000. The man assigned with the defense of Washington, D.C. is a man named Samuel Winder. He had about 8,000 men. So the United States had a military advantage. A, we have the bigger army. B, we are defending our capital. We got to choose where to fight. Because the battle was just outside of Washington, this would be kind of similar, again, back to what Griffin asked earlier. As the battle begins, James Madison actually had been brought out. He was not on the front line, he didn't have a gun in his hand, but he was basically maybe within eye shot of the battle so he could see what was happening. And very simply, folks, the Battle of Bladensburg is an absolute, total debacle. It is an embarrassment. It is a disgrace. The American army, which was largely militia, they turned cowardly. Men were dropping their guns. American ranks broke in less than 2 hours. Literally, from the Battle of Bladensburg, the American army literally breaks apart, and the British will march right into Washington, D.C. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are having trouble, why am I emphasizing embarrassing, horrible, terrible? On August 24th, 1814. The British win the Battle of Bladensburg, and the American capital was captured. August 24th, 1814. And ladies and gentlemen, some of you probably remember from last year because this is that kind of stuff people don't seem to forget. James Madison, as the battle went bad, was grabbed and he was gotten out of there. They took him to Philadelphia. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of those, I'm sorry, you need a girlfriend or a boyfriend. As the British Army enters Washington, D.C., as our capital is captured, a huge error was made. A huge, catastrophic, oops, boo-boo, mistake. Victoria? We forgot Dolly Madison. For those of you who've ever had a boyfriend or girlfriend, I would not recommend this. This is kind of like seeing, you know, like some sort of robbers or gang members and going, ah! And just running and leaving her. Sorry, dear. Ladies and gentlemen, really, Dolly Madison is sitting there doing her knitting or crocheting, kind of looks out the window, and there's red coats everywhere. The amazing thing was, Dolly Madison, being the well-educated woman she was going to sit there where her husband ran off, and she was going to surrender and be noble on behalf of the United States. Can you imagine how embarrassing that would be for the entire world to know that our First Lady was captured? What happens, however? One of the Madison slaves, a woman named Jenny, convinces her, begs her, don't let them catch you. Don't do this. What they do is they convince Dolly Madison to dress up in old crappy clothes. They put her in the kitchen. And ladies and gentlemen, the British capture her. They line up all of the people outside of the Capitol. They literally tell the slaves that they have been freed by the British Empire. And they tell the white people to go home. So the British capture Dolly Madison. They did not recognize her as Dolly Madison, and they released her. Now, how did Jenny convince Dolly to do this? There was a deal. Ladies and gentlemen, Dolly Madison was an intelligent woman. She knew that the British probably, the problem with, that's what I was telling about Washington, is there's not a lot of water. It was not a good place for the British to hold. The British are going to burn our capital. They burned the Congress building, they burned the original Capitol building. What Dolly Madison basically said is, if you want me to hide, I want you guys to help me. The original painting of George Washington, personal diaries of Thomas Jefferson, and the silverware of John Adams will all be hidden, and they will all be smuggled out of the Capitol by the other workers. That was Dolly Madison's agreement. So there was one memento or one artifact of the original presidents that they used in the White House, all stolen. For those of you who are probably, which one seems the weirdest? Does anyone know why they did that? Why did they pick? It actually makes perfect sense. Anybody? But it's wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, the Adams family were renowned silversmiths. That was their family business. That was their family trade. So it sounds silly at first, but this is actually what the Adams family was known for, so it actually makes sense. Ladies and gentlemen, the other part, if you did not get it, is our capital is burned down. All the government buildings, anything connected with the United States is burned to the ground, and the British, probably laughing, march away. There is no way you can argue this. The Battle of Bladensburg is a terrible, humiliating defeat of the United States, which really, once again, convinces England that the United States is not in our league.
Why is it called the Battle of Bladensburg?
What you want to think of as the actual battle that where Winder and Ross fought is at a little kind of town outside of the capital, and that was Bladensburg. It's kind of like a suburb.
So who was the vice president at the time?
I would honestly imagine, I cannot say this for sure without double checking, he probably was either with Madison or they had separated him before the battle. Okay. So here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, the next item the British did so well is we are going to move on to Baltimore. So the next item is the Battle of Baltimore, which is also known as Fort McHenry. And ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you this right now. Is there anyone who'd like to take a bet with me on this? I bet you each and every one of you knows this battle. Is there anyone who'd like to bet with Cleveland? I will bet donuts for the class. Quentin, are you willing to bet?
Start putting a banner.
Well, Quentin, ah!
Oh my God.
You're taking away my fun. I'm trying to get a sucker here. Quentin, you want to bet?
I'll bet. I'll bet.
I bet I know it.
Ladies and
What am I
gentlemen,
betting against?
ladies and gentlemen, here we go. The British so well in Washington that they then head to Baltimore. The reason they go to Baltimore is it's on the Chesapeake Bay. The British can bring up their navy. The problem is, and that's where Quentin is kind of cheating, is the Chesapeake Bay kind of looks like this. The city of Baltimore is here. And folks, what will become the most important thing is in the middle of Baltimore Harbor, there is an island with a fort, and the fort is called Fort McHenry. In order for the British to capture the city, in order for the British to basically control the city, they have to control that fort. Without the fort, the British ships would basically be under constant attack. So here is Fort McHenry. So the British are kind of here, and they are moving towards the city and the fort. If you are looking for a date, this is September 13, 1814. Now, Quentin already spoiled my fun, but what happened is this. As the British arrive in the Baltimore area, what a lot of you may find weird, but folks, this goes back for centuries. In Washington, the British took prisoners. They took wealthy, prominent Americans, kind of like you asked the vice president. They took maybe a congressman, and they would arrest them. And ladies and gentlemen, the reason knights on their shield used to have the emblem, you know, whatever it was, the dragon, the lion, the peacock, whatever your family crest was, what most people don't know is the emblem was on your glove. If a soldier, a knight, was ever captured in battle, your glove was taken off. I believe it was the left. And it was sent back to your country. That glove would basically tell people whose family it was. You would be given the glove to let you know your loved one has been captured. If you wanted them back, you had to work out a ransom. Ladies and gentlemen, when the British arrive in Baltimore, word gets out that they have arrested some people. Loved ones then send lawyers to try to negotiate for their release. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the lawyers who is sent is a man named Francis Scott Key. Francis Scott Key gets involved because he is hired to go to the British ships and negotiate the release of a man named Dr. Alexander Cochrane. How or why is Cochrane's name famous? Because he kind of is what causes this. Dr. Cochrane had been arrested in the Battle of Bladensburg. Sir Francis Scott Key is hired by the Cochrane family to go and work out a deal. Is everybody okay on this right now?
So the Battle of Baltimore, is that?
The Battle of Baltimore will really be kind of after McHenry. So McHenry will be first. Right now the British are kind of there, preparing. The British would literally be, if you look at the map, they're here, and the battle is kind of coming. Folks, this is what happens. Yes, sir? Sir Francis Scott Key is the lawyer.
And then
Alexander Cochrane is the arrested gentleman. Folks, the reality is this. Mr. Key works out a deal. He wants to leave. Some of you have all seen, Captain Jack and Pirates. And they say that word parlay, the white flag. When Francis Scott Key came out, he came under the sign of peace, protection. After Francis Scott Key has negotiated an agreement, he goes to leave, and guess what? The British have begun their attack on Fort McHenry. As Francis Scott Key comes on the boat, there's all these explosions, there's men's running around. Francis Scott Key basically can see, because what has happened is the British have moved small ships up, and they have begun the attack on Fort McHenry. So Francis Scott Key is literally involved in, kind of involved in the battle. Why is it important? The British are responsible for him. They don't want to put him on a rowboat, send him off on the Chesapeake, and have him killed. Because the battle has begun, Francis Scott, you must stay here until the battle is over. So you have an American citizen on a British ship watching as the British attack Fort McHenry. Ladies and gentlemen, as Francis Scott Key is sitting there, he begins to doodle little notes on his log pad. He's doodling little notes about what he sees. He's doodling notes about, you know, kind of the battle. And of course, he begins to note, the fighting goes on. All of a sudden it's dark out. You know, he's seeing the explosions light up the sky. Follow along in the song. And of course, Francis Scott Key is sitting there. He doesn't know how long the battle will be. And finally he decides he might as well go to bed. And of course, what is the ultimate purpose? What is the song about? When Francis Scott Key gets up in the morning, he will simply get up, he will look out, and he will look at the fort to see what flag is there. If it's an American flag, we held the fort. If it's a British flag, the fort fell. And the city of Baltimore is in trouble. Ladies and gentlemen, the little notes that Francis Scott Key writes, of course, later will be kind of constructed into more of a poem. It'll eventually put the words, and that is the Star-Spangled Banner. Ladies and gentlemen, the Star-Spangled Banner is an account by Francis Scott Key of the assault on Fort McHenry. And I would hope, for the goodness of everything in the world, you can probably figure out that America wins the battle, because we probably would not make our national anthem a battle we lose. Right? So the fort holds. You might also want to notice that on the following day, Robert Ross tries a land attack. Despite the defense of Fort McHenry, there was still, just like Bladensburg, the possibility that the American army could be overpowered again, and the British could simply sneak up by land. What happens in the land battle, ladies and gentlemen, is once again, even though the British were doing well, as the British were closing in on Baltimore, Robert Ross will be shot. He falls to the ground. The British commander eventually dies, and when Robert Ross dies, the British basically pull their army back, and this is what really kind of finishes off or saves the Battle of Baltimore. So in the Battle of Baltimore, the two key items is the defense of Fort McHenry, and Robert Ross, when he is killed, the British basically stop or end their assault. Questions? Ladies and gentlemen, the next item will be the attack on New York. I don't know. Again, maybe I'm too much of a history teacher. I always find the date to be interesting on this. Ladies and gentlemen, the battle for New York will be fought very much like the three-pronged attack. The British are basically coming down from Lake Champlain. The British Army is coming from Montreal. They're working their way down. And it is called the Battle of Plattsburgh. The Battle of Plattsburgh, and this is the part that I always just find weird. The Battle of Plattsburgh is between American Thomas McDonough, and the British commander is a man by the name of Privot, P-R-I-V-O-T. Folks, just as you're kind of putting this in your head, the Battle of Plattsburgh, the British are coming down from Montreal. The Battle of Plattsburgh is a little bit like Put-in Bay. It's kind of makeshift navies. Please notice, during the War of 1812, there are two battles on the lakes, one on Lake Champlain, one on Lake Erie. That is going to have an issue after the war. So the Battle of Plattsburgh is on Lake Champlain. The British, just like John Burgoyne, are trying to work their way down Lake Champlain and then down the Hudson. The battle is on, and this is the part I just find just weird, is on September 11th, 1814. And again, I say that because of the fact that, you know, you have two major kind of very violent events that have taken place in New York history on basically the same day. On September 11th, 1814, the United States and the British basically fight to a draw. Neither side effectively won control of Lake Champlain. Neither side had a decisive victory. But what do you want to note? The British, remembering the sting of Burgoyne, remember the Battle of Saratoga, remember how that is so far in the middle of nowhere, The British felt that the American defense on Lake Champlain was strong enough that the British abandoned their attack on New York. Ladies and gentlemen, the note you might want to make is after the Battle of Plattsburgh is when the British finally start beginning to acknowledge or say, the war probably isn't worth the money. England has been at war for 12 years with France, and literally it is after Plattsburgh that England decides, why don't we just cut a deal and get out of this stupid mess? So please understand, even though Plattsburgh does not seem to be a really dramatic battle, it does lead to the end of the war, so it does have some significance. No. There's another battle? No. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm teasing with Quentin. We have a battle left, but there's a problem. I don't want to cover the battle yet. The next item I'd like to cover is the Treaty of Ghent.
Treaty of what?
Ghent, G-H-E-N-T. Ladies and gentlemen, historically, where do you negotiate deals? What country?
Versailles?
Which is in?
Paris?
Paris is in.
My bad, France.
Ladies and gentlemen, because of all the Napoleonic crap, people were looking for a different place. The Treaty of Ghent is in Belgium, so basically it's in England sit down, and the first thing you want to notice is the Treaty of Ghent sucks, because literally as we are doing the Treaty of Ghent, England is negotiating what is called the Congress of Vienna. The Congress of Vienna is what will happen to Napoleon and the French Empire.
Why are we in Ghent? You said that it has to be at a neutral site?
Well, basically Ghent is simply the negotiations to end the war. Quentin asked, what about the last battle? And there's one more battle.
No, but why are we in wherever?
To negotiate the end of the war. We simply sent negotiators. The reason you go to Ghent is you go to a neutral site. Yeah, I'm sorry. You all ready?
What was British negotiating?
What was that? Ladies and gentlemen, what you want to understand, folks, is in a minute you're about to be like, wait a second, what's the treaty? Folks, the Treaty of Ghent is somewhere between brilliant, stupid, dumb, idiotic. I don't know. The reason the Treaty of Ghent is so uneventful is the British and the rest of Europe is doing what's called the Congress of Vienna. The Congress of Vienna is the rest of the European countries dividing up and deciding what happens to France. Napoleonic War was a 12-year war that had devastated Europe. Big deal. The problem in America, the War of 1812, was relatively insignificant. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready? The Treaty of Ghent, which is the agreement to end the War of 1812, which is signed, as Quentin wanted to point out, before the last battle. Because we have one battle yet to go. Ladies and gentlemen, the Treaty of Ghent says, quo ante bellum. That's it.
What?
Quo, Q-U-O, anti, A-N-T-E, bellum, B-E-L-L-U-M. For those of you who do not know Latin, quo ante bellum means as before the war. Ladies and gentlemen, remember the day we started the war? The Treaty of Ghent is the world's greatest do-over. We are going to basically erase everything that's happened up to that point, and England and America agree that we are going to restore everything the way it was when the war began. Why will there be no impressment? The Orders in Council would dissolve because the French problem is over. So, ladies and gentlemen, the War of 1812 ends with the Treaty of Ghent, which basically says the war is over, and the relationship between America and England will be reestablished. Quentin wanted to point out things like Orders in Council, search and seizure. They ended not because of the Treaty of Ghent, because England never admitted they did anything wrong. They ended because France was defeated.